She was bleeding in his alley, one eye swollen shut, shoes gone, dress ruined, and the first thing she said to the most dangerous man in Seoul was, "Don't even think about stealing my bag." He could have walked away. He has walked away from things far more important than a stranger bleeding in the rain. That is who Kang Hyun-woo is. That is who he has always been. But he didn't walk away, and in 6 days he would be sitting across from a DNA result that would break 22 years of silence open like a wound that had never actually closed. Stay with me, because this story does not go where you think it goes. It goes somewhere better, somewhere that is going to make you laugh, and then make you cry, and then make you sit with your hand over your mouth, thinking about the things we carry for the people we love, without ever telling them why. Watch this to the end. I promise you it is worth every minute. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Hit subscribe before this video is over, because we tell stories like this every single week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Now, let's go back to the alley. Let's go back to the rain. Let's go back to the moment Kang Hyun-woo crouched down in front of a girl he had never met and felt something in his chest make a sound he had not heard in 22 years. Let's start there. The first thing Mafia boss Kang Hyun-woo noticed about the girl bleeding out in his alley was that she was still clutching her handbag. Not her wound, not the wall she was leaning against. Her handbag. He stood over her, 3 of his men behind him, the rain coming down so hard it was washing the blood off the concrete before it could even settle, and this girl, this small, stubborn, absolutely ridiculous girl, looked up at him with one eye swollen shut and said, "Don't even think about stealing it." He blinked. His second in command, Park Ji-hoon, leaned in close and whispered, "Boss, should I?" "No," Hyun-woo said. He didn't know why he said it. He had said no to many things in his life. No to mercy, no to hesitation, no to anything that slowed him down or cost him more than it gave back. But standing in the rain over a bleeding girl who was threatening a mafia boss over a knockoff designer bag, something in his chest made a sound he hadn't heard in a very long time. He crouched down to her level. She flinched. Then she squared her jaw and stopped flinching, like she was angry at herself for doing it in the first place. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him like the question was a trap. "Why?" "Because you're bleeding in my alley." "This is a public alley." Park Ji-hoon made a strangled noise behind him. Hyun-woo almost smiled. Almost. "You've been beaten." "I noticed," she said. "Who did it?" "Why do you care?" "I don't." He reached out and moved a strand of wet hair from her face, and she went completely still, watching him the way a cat watches something it hasn't decided to trust yet. "But they're in my territory, and I don't allow people to make messes in my territory. So I'm a mess." "You're bleeding on my ground, same thing." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, like it cost her something, "There were 3 of them. They wanted the bag." She looked down at it. "My mama gave me this bag." And there it was, that sound in his chest again. He stood up and said, without turning around, "Take her inside." "Boss." I said, "Take her inside, Ji-hoon, and find me the 3 men who touched her." He walked back into the building without looking at her again. He didn't need to. He had already memorized her face without meaning to. The line of her jaw. The way her right hand held that bag even as the left one trembled. The swelling over her left eye that made something cold and very dangerous begin to move behind his ribcage. He didn't know this girl. He told himself that all the way up the stairs. He didn't know her. Her name was Naomi Carter. She told them this 20 minutes later, sitting in a chair in one of the building's side rooms with a first aid kit open on the table beside her, and a woman named Mrs. O pressing a cloth to the cut above her eyebrow with the efficiency of someone who had done this many, many times. "Naomi," Mrs. O said approvingly. "Pretty name." "Thank you," Naomi said. She was looking around the room in a way that was trying very hard to look casual. It was not casual at all. Her eyes were cataloging every exit, every camera, every face. Hyun-woo noticed this from the doorway. He noticed other things too. She was young, early 20s maybe. She had the kind of face that was made for laughing, full cheeks, wide eyes, a mouth that looked like it defaulted to smiling even when the rest of her was doing something else. She was wearing a yellow dress that was now mostly brown with mud and rust red at the hem, and she had lost one shoe somewhere, and she still had that bag in her lap. "You can put the bag down," he said. She looked at him. "I'm fine holding it." "It's not going anywhere." "I know, because I'm holding it." Mrs. O hid a smile behind the cloth. Hyunwoo stepped fully into the room and pulled a chair out from the other side of the table and sat down across from her. He put his hands flat on the table where she could see them, because he understood body language and what it did to people who were frightened but refusing to show it. "You're American," he said. "Black American," she said, specifically, in case it matters. "It doesn't." "Good." She tilted her chin up. "It shouldn't." "How long have you been in Seoul?" 6 days. "Alone?" She hesitated, just a fraction. "Yes." He filed that away. "Why were you in this part of the city at this hour?" "I was looking for a restaurant." "At 11 at night." "I was hungry at 11 at night. Is that a crime?" "In this neighborhood, almost everything is a crime." She processed this. Then she said, "Are you a criminal?" The room got very quiet. Mrs. O became very interested in folding gauze. Hyunwoo looked at Naomi Carter across the table and said, "Yes." She didn't look away. He had expected her to. People usually did when he said it plainly like that, without dressing it up or cushioning it. She just held his gaze with those wide, assessing eyes and said, "At least you're honest about it." "It's the easiest lie to avoid," he said. "Everyone already knows." A beat. Then the corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but something that wanted to be one. "My mother always said," Naomi started, then stopped. "What did she say?" She looked down at the bag. Her fingers moved over the clasp, the way you touch something that has become a habit, a comfort, a way of reaching for someone who isn't there anymore. She said the most dangerous men are the ones who are honest about what they are, because at least you know what you're walking into. Your mother was wise. She was. Past tense, quiet and final and heavy. He didn't push. He had learned a long time ago that grief didn't need pushing. It came on its own schedule and it stayed as long as it wanted, and the worst thing you could do was ask it to explain itself. "You'll stay here tonight," he said. Her eyes snapped back up. "Excuse me?" "It's not safe for you to go out. The men who attacked you, they may still be nearby." "I have a hotel. I'll have someone take you in the morning." "I can take myself." "Miss Carter." He said her name for the first time, and something happened when he did. Something shifted in the air between them. He felt it, and he was nearly certain she felt it too, because she went very still, the same way she had gone still when he touched her hair in the alley. "I have just had 3 men located because they put their hands on a woman in my territory. They are currently experiencing consequences I will not describe over a first aid table. The men who send those kinds of men don't give up easily. Tonight, you stay. Tomorrow, I'll make sure you reach your hotel safely. That is not a negotiation. It's a courtesy." She stared at him. He stood up and straightened his jacket. "Mrs. O will show you to a room." He turned to leave. "Why?" she said. He paused. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice was different now, stripped of the sharpness, the quick little comebacks, just genuine, honest confusion. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why?" He stood with his back to her for a moment. The rain was still going outside. He could hear it against the windows. He didn't have an answer that made sense. He had been trying to find one since the alley. "Get some rest, Miss Carter," he said, and left. He did not sleep. This was not unusual. Kang Hyun-woo had not been a good sleeper for 15 years, and he had made peace with this the way you make peace with a war wound. You acknowledge it, you work around it, you stop expecting it to go away. He sat in his office on the top floor with a glass of whiskey he wasn't drinking and the city spread out below him like a circuit board, all lit up and humming with things that didn't stop just because the hour was late. He was thinking about a woman, not Naomi Carter. Another woman, one he had thought about less and less as the years went on, because thinking about her used to feel like pressing a bruise, and eventually you learn to stop pressing. You learn to breathe around the ache. You learn to take the parts of yourself that belong to a memory and put them somewhere quiet and dark where they can't reach you while you're trying to run an empire. Her name had been Diana Carter. He went very still. He set down the glass. Carter. He thought about Naomi, her age, early 20s, 22, maybe 23. He thought about the way she said, "My mama gave me this bag with that particular softness, that particular past tense." He thought about Diana who had been American, who had been warm and laughing and completely unafraid of him in a way that had undone him from the very beginning, who had disappeared from his life 22 years ago with reasons he had never fully accepted and a goodbye he had never fully believed. He picked up the glass, put it back down, stood up, sat down, stood up again. He was Kang Hyun-woo. He did not pace. He made decisions. He made a decision. He had Mrs. O check the next morning. Casually, she said, "Just chatting." Naomi told her she was 22 years old. She told her she had been born in Atlanta, Georgia. She told her her mother had passed away 4 months ago from an illness she had fought for 2 years, and that she had come to Seoul because her mother had always talked about it, had loved it, had wanted to come back one day and never gotten the chance. Come back. Mrs. O came to Hyun-woo's office with this information and a face that was doing its very best to be neutral. She had been with him for 11 years. She knew everything. She had the kind of loyalty that came not from fear but from something older and more complicated than that, and she was one of perhaps 4 people alive whose face he could read without effort. Her face right now was saying, "Be careful." "That's all," he said. Hyun-woo. She used his name, which she only did when she was abandoning professionalism in favor of something more important. "Think carefully." "I always do." "You're thinking with something other than your head right now." He looked at her. She looked back, unblinking, unbothered, the woman who had once told a room full of armed men to take their shoes off before entering her kitchen. "She could be anyone," she said, "and you could be wrong." "I know. And if you're not wrong..." "I know," he said again, quieter. She nodded, clasped her hands. "She's awake." She asked if there was coffee. "Get her coffee." "I already did." A pause at the door. She said it was the best coffee she'd ever had. Then she asked if she could have another cup, and I said yes. And she said she could see why people join cults for less. She allowed herself a very small smile. "I like her." "Go away, Mrs. O." She went away. Naomi was in the kitchen when he found her, both hands wrapped around a mug that was clearly her second, or possibly third cup of coffee, looking out the window at the city with an expression that was equal parts wonder and something sadder underneath. She had been given clean clothes, a plain white shirt, dark trousers, nothing that fit quite right. And she had done something with her hair that involved 2 pencils and a clip, and the kind of structural confidence that suggested she had been improvising with her hair for most of her life. She heard him come in and turned around. "Good morning," she said, polite, a little guarded. Last night's sharp edges were still there, but filed down by sleep and good coffee. "Good morning." He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter across from her. Comfortable distance, non-threatening geometry. "How's your eye?" She touched it gingerly. "It looks worse than it feels." "It looks very bad." "Wow, thank you, that's so kind. I'm not trying to be kind, I'm being accurate." She looked at him over the rim of her mug. "Has anyone ever told you that you're a lot first thing in the morning?" "No." "That's because everyone around you is scared of you." "And you're not?" She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "I'm a little scared of you," she said finally, honestly. "But you have really good coffee, and you didn't let me die in an alley, So I'm filing you under complicated for now. He almost smiled again. He was doing that a lot since last night, almost smiling. He set down his cup. He crossed his arms and looked at her in a way that he knew was direct, to the point of uncomfortable. He had been building to something since he walked into this kitchen, and he was done building. Your mother's name, he said. Was it Diana? The mug stopped halfway to her mouth. She lowered it slowly. How do you know that? Her voice had changed completely. The warmth was gone. The comfortable, sparring energy was gone. She was looking at him with something very sharp and very alert and very afraid. How do you know my mother's name? Naomi, how do you know her name? She stepped back, not toward the door, but just back, instinctive, the way you pull away from something that suddenly got too close. Who are you? Did you know her? Did you… She stopped. Her eyes moved over his face with sudden, frantic attention. How old are you? 43, he said. She went pale under her brown skin. He watched her do the math. He had been doing it all night. No, she said. It wasn't a refusal. It was what people say when they need a moment before something enormous arrives. No, you're not… I don't know, he said carefully. I want to be honest with you. I don't know yet. But I knew a woman named Diana Carter 23 years ago. She was from Atlanta. She was… He paused. Some things didn't survive being described. She was the most alive person I had ever met. And she left, and she never told me why, and I never… He stopped. I just never… Naomi was very still. My mother, she said, barely audible. She never told me who my father was. A breath. She said he was someone she loved in a time she couldn't go back to. She said he was dangerous, that it was safer for me to not know. The kitchen was quiet. The city hummed outside. Hyunwoo uncrossed his arms and said, very gently, May I see your arm? She blinked. What? Your left arm, the inside of your wrist. He rolled up the cuff of his own sleeve and held it out. There, on the inside of his left wrist, just below the base of his palm, a small mark, the color of a bruise that never fully healed, shaped like nothing precise but familiar in the way shapes become familiar when you have looked at them your whole life. My mother had one. Her mother had one. It runs in my family, on the left arm, always. The women it skips, the men it never does. He held her gaze. Diana had it too. I noticed it the first week I knew her. She was embarrassed about it. I told her I thought it was… He stopped. Naomi had gone absolutely motionless. Then, with the slowness of someone approaching something they're not sure will be there when they get close, she pushed up the sleeve of the white shirt. There, on the inside of her left wrist, the same mark. The room tilted. He had prepared himself for this. He had spent the whole night preparing himself for this, building walls and reserves and rational distance, because he was Kang Hyun-woo and he did not come undone. He did not lose control of situations. He did not stand in kitchens with his hands braced on the counter and feel 23 years collapse into a single moment like a building falling down in slow motion. He was doing all of those things. Naomi looked at her own wrist, then at his face. Oh, she said. The smallest word, the largest sound. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor. Not in a faint. She didn't faint. She just sat down, cross-legged, right there on the kitchen tiles, like her legs had simply voted to stop participating in vertical life. She put her face in her hands, and she sat there and she breathed. And Hyunwoo looked at her for a moment before he lowered himself to the floor too, and sat across from her. Close enough to reach her, far enough to give her room. They sat on the kitchen floor of a Mafia boss's building in Seoul, and the morning came through the windows yellow and full, and neither of them said anything for a very long time. Then Naomi said, muffled through her hands, I came to Seoul because my mother wanted to come back. I know. She never said why she left. I know. She loved it here. She used to describe the streets to me like she was homesick for a place she was only ever a visitor in. Her hands came down. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She was doing that stubborn thing with her jaw again. She talked about the food, the night markets, the way the city looked when it rained. She looked at him. She talked about it like she was talking about a person. He couldn't speak for a moment. Diana loved the rain, he said, when he could. Something in Naomi's face broke open and sealed itself back up in one movement. She did, she said. She used to open every window in the house when it rained, no matter how cold it was. My grandmother thought she was insane. The ghost of a smile. She probably was, a little. She was completely insane, he said, with absolute tenderness. She once argued with 3 of my men about the correct way to eat ramen, and won. Naomi laughed. It came out surprised, like she hadn't expected it, and then she laughed again, for real this time. That full, easy laugh he had thought her face was built for, and it sounded like someone he used to know. His throat tightened in a way he refused to acknowledge. We need to confirm it, he said, because he was still a man who dealt in certainties, even when the uncertain thing was sitting on his kitchen floor, sharing a laugh that had a ghost in it. A test. For both of us. I know, she nodded. Professional. Sensible. I know. We should do that. A beat. This is very weird, she said. Yes. Like, unbelievably weird. I came here for closure and possibly good bibimbap, and now. Yeah. She looked at her wrist again. Then at him. There was something so complicated happening in her eyes. Fear and wonder and grief, and something that wasn't quite hope, but was sitting right next to it, trying to decide whether to stay. What if it's true? He looked at her. This girl who held her handbag like armor, who talked back to dangerous men in dark alleys, who sat on floors without apology and laughed like her mother, and had the mark on her wrist that his family carried, and had come to his city looking for a woman who was gone. Then, he said, I spent 22 years not knowing I had a daughter, and she spent 22 years not knowing she had a father, and we would both have a great deal to make up for. Naomi was quiet. Then she said, I'm not an easy person. I have been told I'm worse. I have opinions about everything. So do I. I talk a lot. I talk very little. We would balance out. Another laugh, smaller this time. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, breathed. My mama, she said softly. She made me promise to come here. On her last good day. She made me promise. She didn't say why. She just said Seoul would give me what she hadn't been able to. The weight of that settled over both of them. Hyunwoo thought about Diana, about the last time he had seen her, the fight they had that wasn't really a fight, the way she had looked at him like she was memorizing him. He had thought it was love. He had thought she was being sentimental. He had not known it was the last time. He had not known there was already something she was keeping from him, curled quiet and new and the size of a secret. He had not known. If he had known, he would not think about that now. There was no use in that direction. The road only went forward. Are you hungry? He said. She blinked. What? You said last night you were looking for a restaurant. You haven't eaten. He stood up from the floor with significantly more dignity than he had sat down with, and extended his hand. Let me make you breakfast. She looked at his hand. You cook? My chef doesn't arrive until 10. That's not an answer. It's a conditional answer. She took his hand and let him pull her up. Standing, she was shorter than she seemed. The personality took up so much space that he had mentally added inches that weren't there. She looked up at him and something moved through her expression. Something searching and serious and young, in the way that people are young when they are standing at the beginning of something they didn't expect. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay, make me breakfast. But if it's bad, I'm going to tell you, and I need you to know that I'm not going to be polite about it. He turned to the refrigerator. I would be disappointed if you were. He made juk. Simple, the way his mother had made it. Rice porridge with egg and sesame oil, and the kind of patience that breakfast required when the morning was doing something significant. Naomi sat at the counter and watched him with her chin in her hand, and did not offer to help, which he appreciated. Some people helped when they shouldn't. She seemed to understand that some things needed to be done alone. My friend Kezia is going to absolutely lose her mind, she said. Your friend? Back home. She's the one who helped me plan this trip. She's obsessed with K-dramas. She's going to think I made this up. Are you planning to tell her? Naomi looked at him. She's my best friend. I tell her everything. Even that you spent the night in a Mafia boss's building? Especially that. She paused. She already knows I spent the night. I texted her before I went to sleep. She said, and I quote, Naomi Elaine Carter, if you die in a foreign country before I get there, I will never forgive you. He stirred the porridge. Elaine. My middle name. My mom's middle name, too. He was quiet for a moment. Diana Elaine Carter. Naomi sucked in a quiet breath. You knew her full name. I knew everything about her, he said, simply. The kitchen was warm with cooking steam. Outside, Seoul was waking up. Deliveries and buses and the distant conversation of a city that had survived everything thrown at it and intended to keep surviving. He plated the juk and set it in front of her, and poured her more coffee without being asked, and stepped back. She looked at the bowl. She picked up the spoon. She tasted it. Her eyes closed. He watched her, this girl who might be his daughter, and felt something in the architecture of his chest rearrange itself around a space that had always been there and that he had spent 22 years not looking at directly. This, she said, eyes still closed, is unfairly good. It's the sesame oil. It's more than the sesame oil. She opened her eyes. You're going to tell me your mother taught you, aren't you? She did. Mine too. She looked down at the bowl. Juk was the only thing my mom made that tasted like the restaurants here. I used to beg her to make it on sick days. A breath that was almost a laugh and was something else too. She always said she learned it from someone who knew what they were doing. He sat down across from her. She looked up. She was talking about you, Naomi said. Not a question. Probably. She taught me the food. Her voice was very careful, very steady. The jaw was doing the thing again. And the language. My Korean is actually pretty decent, which is funny because she said she learned it from a... She stopped, pressed her lips together. She called you her person. She never said your name. But that's what she called you. When I asked who taught her Korean, she said her person. And she'd get this look. She demonstrated it, this expression of pure involuntary memory, eyes going soft and a little lost and a little defiant all at once. That look. He recognized the look, because he had probably made that same face, on and off, for 22 years, whenever Seoul reigned. Your Korean is decent, he said, because he needed to say something ordinary. And your mother's was excellent. Where does yours break down? She took another spoonful of juk, composed herself. Grateful, he thought, for the ordinary question. Formal speech. My vocabulary is fine, but my endings get sloppy when I'm tired or stressed. Seoul will fix that quickly. Is that an invitation to stay? He hadn't meant it that way. Or he hadn't known he meant it that way. You don't have to decide anything today, he said. Today we confirm. After that... He shrugged slightly, a gesture so uncharacteristic of him that Park Ji-hoon would have fainted to see it. After that, we figure out what comes next. She nodded, ate, looked out the window. She loved you, she said quietly. I want you to know that. Whatever her reasons were for leaving, and I don't know them, she took them with her, And I am so angry about that. I'm furious at her, actually, which is a really complicated feeling for someone whose mother just died. But she loved you. The way she talked about her person, nobody talks like that about something ordinary. He was glad he was sitting down. I loved her too, he said, for whatever it is worth, at this distance. She nodded, absorbing this. Then she looked at him with those wide, assessing eyes that had been cataloging exits in the alley and now were doing something more difficult, cataloging him. You're scary, she said. Yes. Like actually scary, not movie scary. Real scary. Yes. But you make good juk, and you sat on the floor with me, and you didn't press when you didn't need to. She tilted her head. My mom had good taste. The sound that came out of him surprised both of them. It was something between a breath and a word, and something that had not visited his face in a very long time. A real laugh. Small, rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in years giving way at last. Naomi grinned. It was Diana's grin. Exact, perfect, devastating. He looked down at the counter and breathed and said, in Korean, without planning to, "How does something like this happen?" And Naomi, without missing a beat, in Korean that was slightly imperfect at the endings but completely sure of itself everywhere else, said, "But here we are." He looked up. She shrugged with one shoulder. Here we are. The DNA test came back 6 days later. Hyunwoo already knew what it would say. He had known from the kitchen floor. But he was a man who built things on certainties, and this was the kind of thing that deserved the weight of a fact. He read the result in his office. He put it down on the desk. He sat with it for a while. Then he called Mrs. O. "Tell Naomi I'd like to see her," he said. "She's in the courtyard," Mrs. O said. "She's teaching Jungmin to play Uno, and she's cheating. She brought a deck from her hotel. She's been here 4 hours, and she's already corrupted my junior staff." He closed his eyes. "Tell her I'd like to see her. I'll tell her as soon as she finishes demolishing him. She's winning by an enormous margin, and she seems very pleased about it." He hung up. He looked at the result again. 99.97% probability of paternity. He put it in his desk drawer. He got up. He went to the window and looked at Seoul, his city, his complicated, layered, beloved city that had taken everything from him and given him everything back in forms he didn't always recognize. It had taken Diana. It had given him Naomi. He was not a man who believed in clean equations. The math of his life had never balanced. But standing at the window while somewhere below him his daughter cheated at Uno, with a gleeful disregard for fairness that was absolutely, unmistakably, entirely her mother's, he felt something settle in him. Not peace exactly. Something better. Something more honest than peace. When she came up, she already knew from his face. She stood in the doorway of his office with her hands clasped in front of her, and her chin up and the jaw doing the thing, and her eyes very bright. "So?" she said. He turned from the window. He looked at her, his daughter, this person who had bled in his alley and argued with him about public property and sat on his kitchen floor and eaten his juk and called him scary and laughed with her mother's laugh and learned her mother's second language and traveled halfway across the world on a promise from a dying woman who had loved them both. "So," he said. She crossed the room and she didn't ask permission, and he didn't require any. She wrapped her arms around him and pressed her face against his shoulder. She was shorter than him, his daughter. She had gotten Diana's height and his stubbornness. And he put his arms around her and held on. They stood there in his office while Seoul moved outside, and the afternoon light came through the windows long and golden. "I'm so angry at her," she said into his shoulder. "I know. For not telling us. For both of us not getting—" Her voice wavered. "All this time." "I know," he said again. "Me too. I need you to know that I am still also grieving her and loving her enormously at the same time as being furious. Grief is not simple. No. A breath. It really isn't." He had not held someone like this in a very long time. He had forgotten what it felt like to hold something you were afraid to lose, and to know that the fear was not a weakness, but just the price of having something real. After a while, she pulled back and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and said, "Okay, so, I'm your daughter. You're my daughter. You're my—" She stopped. The words seemed to require a runway. She tried again. "You're my dad." "Yes." She exhaled. "Wow, okay." She looked around his office like she was seeing it for the first time with new information installed. "This is wild." "Yes. Your office is very intimidating." "It's meant to be." "Why is there a sword?" "Decorative." "Is it, though?" "Partially." She looked at him. "I'm going to have so many questions." "I have time." "Like, so many questions. About everything. About your family, about Seoul, about what my mom was like when you knew her. She was what, 20? 21. Oh my God, she was basically my age." She pressed both hands to her cheeks. "Oh my God, I'm going to need to sit down." "There are chairs." "I might need the floor again." "Whatever you need." She sat down, in a chair this time. Progress. He sat across from her. "Tell me something," she said, "about her, when she was here. One thing." He thought about it carefully, the way you approach something fragile that you want to give to someone whole. "She used to walk into every room," he said, like she had already decided to be the best thing in it. Not arrogantly, just confidently, like she had done a calculation and the calculation came back in her favor. He paused. "You do the same thing." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "She was terrified her whole life. She just never let it show." "I know." "She was the bravest, scared person." Her eyes went bright again. "If she could see this—" "Maybe she can," he said. He was not a religious man. He was barely a sentimental one. But some things required the possibility of something beyond what could be proven. Maybe she arranged it. Naomi laughed and cried at the same time, the way you do when something is too big for either alone. Then she wiped her face and sat up straight and said, with complete seriousness, "I need you to know that I'm keeping the Carter. It was my mom's name, and I'm keeping it. I wouldn't ask you to change it. Naomi Carter, that's who I am." "Good," he said. "It's a good name. If I were to, hypothetically, someday, want to, I don't know, also learn more about the Kang side." "There's no rush," he said. "We have time." She nodded, swallowed, nodded again. "And," he said carefully, "the danger of my world, I want to be transparent with you about that. I won't ask you to pretend it isn't real." She looked at him steadily. "My mom said you were dangerous. She wasn't wrong." A pause. "But she also trusted you with herself when she was exactly my age. And I think she trusted you to do right by whatever she left behind." That sat in the room quietly for a moment. "I want to try," he said, "to do right by it. By you. If you'll give me the chance to figure out what that looks like." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "My friend Kezia is going to think this is the most dramatic K-drama plot twist in the history of K-dramas." He waited. "She's going to want to visit." "She's welcome." "She's a lot. I live in a building full of professional criminals. I think I can manage one additional person." Naomi laughed. The laugh moved through the office and rearranged everything it touched. Here we are, he thought again. How does something like this happen? And then, quieter, to a woman 22 years gone who had made one impossible decision that broke everything and led, somehow, improbably, through dark alleys and rainstorms and kitchen floors and DNA lab reports, to this. "You were brave, Diana. Even when it hurt me. You were so brave. Thank you for sending her home." That night, for the first time in 15 years, Kang Hyun-woo slept. In the room down the hall, Naomi Carter lay awake looking at the ceiling of a building that shouldn't have felt safe and somehow did, one hand resting over the mark on her wrist, thinking about her mother and this city and the impossible ways a promise kept can rebuild something you never knew was broken. She picked up her phone and texted Kezia. "You're not going to believe this." Then, because it was midnight in Seoul and she was 22 years old, and this was the strangest and most important week of her life, and she was in her father's house for the first time, she put the phone down and let herself cry. Properly. The kind that had been waiting for 6 days and maybe 22 years. Then she wiped her face and looked at the ceiling and said, soft enough that only the room could hear, "Okay, Mama, I see what you did. I'm still upset with you about the 22 years thing. But okay." Outside, Seoul rained. If you've made it this far, I want you to know, thank you. From the bottom of this storyteller's heart, thank you. Naomi and Kang Hyunu's story is just beginning. And if you want to be there when it continues, when Naomi meets the rest of the Kang world, when secrets about why Diana really left finally come to the surface, when Ji-hoon inevitably says something that gets him in trouble with the one woman who scares him more than his boss, then you know what to do. Hit subscribe, because this channel is built for people who feel things deeply and aren't ashamed of it. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have picked up the bag too? And share this with the one person in your life who needs a good story today. I'll see you in the next one. Don't keep me waiting.